spent my entire day wanting to record a podcast episode, and I've literally watched myself overthink it all day long, and now I literally have like 25 minutes before I have to stop, quote unquote, working for the day and to talk about crunch time, talk about procrastination. And it's so funny just to witness myself in this cycle and to witness myself in this pattern of overthinking and trying to, like, what the purpose of the overthinking is trying to have it figured out, right? And it's trying to have this like sense of control over my reality and experience right now, which is kind of comical to say out loud. And also, like, this is literally just a podcast recording. It can be edited, it can be deleted, it can be whatever, right? But then there's also this possibility of, okay, but what if it is published? What if it actually gold? And what if like a billion people listen to it? And then in comes like the flood of, oh my God, we better make it perfect. We better have it all figured out. We better know exactly what we want to say. And so I just want to start with, like, I have no idea what I'm going to say. I have an intention of some things that I want to talk about. And I mean, if you've listened to my podcast before, you know that I am the queen of rambling. I am the queen of not being concise and not being succinct. I am the queen of going on tangents and potentially never coming back to the main point. If you're new to this podcast, hello, welcome. Yeah, you are in for a while. You are in for, why can't I say that? You are in for a ride. A wild ride. Maybe that's what I was trying to say. I literally have this visualization of like a roller coaster because I feel like that's how my brain and my energy, and when I talk to myself like I do in a podcast, because it's not someone having a conversation with me to like reflect something back, and we can't like feed off one another. So I'm literally just feeding off my own brain, and it literally feels like a roller coaster. And so I'm all over the place, and I trust that you can follow along. But yeah, if you're new to the show, welcome. Hello, hello. I'd love to hear from you. I literally have no idea who listens to this thing. And that in itself is a bit of a trip sometimes, because I truly am just talking to a screen, and I can kind of see in the back end of my podcast, whatever it's called, host player thing, how many people are listening, but it's just a number. I would love to put a face to that number and a name to that number. So yeah, say hello if you're listening. Say hello if you're a new listener. Say hello if you are a longtime listener. Say hello if you're a inconsistent listener. I'm here for that too. And speaking of inconsistency, let's start there. Speaking of inconsistency, I have really just been in a season of softening and trusting, leaning into my own pace, and really learning that my natural pace, my natural rhythm is quote unquote inconsistent. And that is a bit of a mental fuck, because coming from a previous identity as, you know, like a people pleaser and a good girl and someone that really did an incredible job at following society's to-do list, it feels so cringy to not be consistent. And so, yeah, I've really been redefining what consistency looks like for me in my life and leaning into more of an organic rhythm and recognizing that, yeah, that rhythm does not look like the way society has taught me consistency should look. And more specifically, like, I've really been witnessing my own patterns of, I guess, like energy and like creative urges, and kind of trusting the urge to go, and then trusting the urge to like lay my ass down and rest. And so last week in particular, like, I feel like I was kind of coming out of a season, like a couple weeks of having my foot on the gas, and having my foot on the gas from a place that felt very innate and intrinsic, and like not from like external pressure, not from obligation. It was really coming from desire. And then all of a sudden, like, my body was hit with like some physical symptoms. I was experiencing a headache. I was bleeding. It was my period, so there's that too. There's obviously the fuckery happening in the sky right now, so that was a part of it too, I'm sure. And so just that like swirling energy felt really contradictive, because there was still a part of me that was riding the high and the momentum of like the creative surge that I was coming from. And it can be really hard to like stop and slow down when you're in it. Again, kind of this roller coaster analogy. Like, could you imagine a roller coaster just coming to an abrupt stop? Like, that's jolting, that's disorienting. And I experienced that last week. It was disorienting. I was like, whoa, like, I didn't plan for this. I didn't prepare for this. I couldn't brace for it. I didn't see it coming, which again is almost comical to say because I know that when I'm bleeding, like, my energy does shift and I'm usually more introspective and like inward. And I was experiencing that, but like it was bigger than that. It was like full on, holy shit, am I burning out? And that was scary. It was really scary to witness myself in that experience. And I think what I'm trying to say in all this is like that that rhythm of inconsistency doesn't necessarily get more comfortable. What I'm beginning to learn is like what's actually consistent and predictable is the inconsistency and the unpredictability. So it's actually about like softening into just knowing that like anything can happen and like we really can't prepare for much. And I actually love that obviously it's changing seasons outside, right? And so depending on where you live, it's probably beginning to look more and more like spring. Where I live here in Canada, we get spring a little bit later. So, I mean, spring is coming, winter is leaving, but it's a very awkward, clunky transition period where, like, the mornings, for example, are still really, really cold and it's confusing. You don't know what to wear because you need like a toque and coat and mitts and boots in the morning, but then by the afternoon, you have your coat off and you're sweating, right? So I want to name that here because again, that feels really real and true for life, like those transition periods between different phases of energy cycles are also really awkward and clunky. And yeah, that's what I've been experiencing. I've been experiencing the awkward clunkiness. And so as I was kind of transitioning into more of this like restful period, I was at first resisting it and having a really hard time kind of just like accepting and surrendering to it. And then when I did, it kind of just illuminated so many of the patterns that I have been, I guess, working on disrupting. And it was almost like they were coming up for me because they were ready to finally be like shifted and like let go of. Crosby, please be quiet. And so specifically like last week in the clusterfuck of my body desperately asking me to slow down, I was also witnessing these urges to do things that felt so out of character for me. And that was disorienting as well. And again, the metaphor that I want to pull here is, again, looking out to nature and looking at this shift in seasons. And season to season, you have different interests, you have different tools and resources that you lean on for support, right? In the winter, maybe you like to go skiing or skating and drink hot chocolate by a fire. And maybe the tools and resources that you lean on to have a sense of safety and like thrive in that season look like stews and winter coats and scarves and logs for the fireplace versus like in the summer that's going to look really different. If you continue to hold on and like have a tight grasp and like clench on to the things that we're working in the winter, your stew, your hot chocolate, your fire for your wood logs for the fire, your warm puffy coat and your boots and your mitts and your toque and your scarf, and your skate, like that's not going to work for you in the summer. In fact, that could actually kill you, right? You could overheat, you could whatever, like that's dramatic. But my point is like we need to really soften into the constant evolving that our being requires us to meet and how in each season, and again, we can look at this through like a macro lens or a micro lens, through the macro lens of like physical outside nature, it's tangible, right? We can get a grasp. Like, yeah, obviously I'm not going to put on ice skates and like drink hot chocolate by the fire when it's roasting outside, right? That just isn't a good time. It's just like in the winter, I'm not going to be wearing like my bathing suit and like laying outside. That could literally kill me. So my point here is like in the more micro seasons and cycles of our life, my question for you, and this is what I've been reflecting on, is like, where are you gripping onto either like your interests and your hobbies and your passions and your resources, your tools, your support systems? What are you leaning into, holding on to so tightly that just truly isn't nurturing and supportive and maybe is actually harmful for you in that particular season? And what do you need to let go of? What do you need to soften into for change and evolution? And so, yeah, some of my examples last week, like I was sharing, I noticed myself just having these almost like impulsive nudges to do things that felt really out of character for me. And I recognize now looking back that, oh no, this makes sense because I was transitioning into a different season or cycle of kind of my life and my journey. And of course, like I am a human being, my identity, my interests, my being is constantly evolving. So of course, all the things around me and the things that I lean into and the things that I crave, that's all evolving too. Anyways, that was one tangent. Let's come back. I mean, all of this is really to kind of anchor into this whole garbage idea of consistency, right? Because consistency, I don't even know what that means. Like, I think consistency, we've been taught to believe it's kind of this sense of linear growth. And obviously, what I'm kind of inviting us to lean into, what I myself am leaning into, is more of this like cyclical embodiment and this like cyclical perspective of growth. But even that, like for me, when I think of a cyclical growth pattern, there's like consistency and predictability in that. And I think deep down we can find that in ourselves, but I think that takes time and work and a lot of openness and awareness and truly softening into just the flow of the day, being present. And if this is like newer for you and you're still kind of unlearning this idea of consistency, we tend to kind of intellectualize. We tend to intellectualize cyclical embodiment at first. And what I mean by that, and actually, let's talk about like the menstrual cycle. That's a perfect one. Because again, this is speaking from my own experience, but when I began connecting to my menstrual cycle, it was after I gave birth, when my period came back for the first time. It was literally the first time as like an adult that I wasn't on birth control or like an IED or anything. And so it's the first time that I actually had the opportunity to be in connection and have a relationship with my menstrual cycle. There wasn't any synthetic hormones kind of overriding my system. And in that, it started out as this intellectual process, right? I had to learn the different phases, right? Obviously, menstrual, follicular, ovulation, and luteal. I had to learn about those, intellectualize them, to understand them, to make sense of them. And then I began to learn kind of what I might feel or experience or crave or desire or not like in each phase. Learned what tools and resources might support me in each phase, in each each. And when I'm talking about phases, like I'm seeing them literally as a different season and a different cycle, right? And the whole thing is also a season and a cycle. That's a mind fuck. Anyway, looking at each one and recognizing that they all required me to meet and tend to them in a different way. And that started as an intellectual process. And then as I've spent cycles and cycles deepening this relationship, it actually becomes a disservice to continue to intellectualize, because when I'm intellectualizing, then I start shoulding on myself. I start saying, oh, I'm ovulating, so I should do this. I should want this. I should like need this. I should, right? Like there's these like weird expectations that come with it because we're craving the predictability. We're craving a sense of control with each phase of the cycle. And I guess what I'm trying to invite us all into is this separation of intellectualization and instead really softening into like what's actually here in the moment. What is the communication that is being offered to me from my body, from this phase of my cycle, and how can I meet it? And the invitation is to use this as a reflection and a mirror for other phases, cycles, and seasons of our life, right? So coming back to my experience last week of recognizing that I was moving into a different phase, season, cycle, noticing that I was almost like discombobulated because I wasn't prepared for it. I couldn't brace for it. And I think that's the whole fucking point. I find like life kind of shakes me up in those ways and reminds me that, oh, you don't get to predict this. You don't get to be fully prepared for this. Because if you are constantly fully prepared, if you're constantly like bracing for things, that's just no way to live. Another metaphor here, like in birth, when you are in labor, you're experiencing contractions, there's purpose to those contractions. There's purpose to that intensity. There's purpose to that pain, if that's what you're perceiving. And if you're bracing, like if you are bracing for it and there's like tension and fear and this like anticipatory tension, that makes it so much worse, right? They say this in like car accidents too, where like as an example, like if you can tell that you're about to be rear-ended and you brace for it, you tense up, it's actually worse. The impact is so much worse. And so what I'm trying to say is I think the universe shakes things up for us so that we can't be prepared. We can't brace for things and things get to be unexpected so that we can really reclaim and lean into our humanness and our vulnerability. Anyways, that was another tangent. Where else do I want to go? I think coming back to, I guess, like the conversation around consistency, another way that that shows up for me is I am always changing my mind. And I shared this in my Instagram stories that this is new for me. This is kind of a new identity that I'm taking on because I spent most of my life really being praised for, being so thoughtful and thinking everything through and being wise beyond my years. And cool. I love that for younger version of me. It brought me a lot of respect. It brought me a lot of praise. And also I can see so clearly that that was me overthinking. That was me in kind of a survival response. And like I shared, that was also me trying to clench on to this sense of control and teetering into perfectionism at times. And so as I've been on this journey, whatever this journey is, there's been a big softening to allowing myself to change my mind. And that also invites me to make decisions quicker and to trust first choice, best choice. That's new for me. I've never been the type of person that has like a visceral, like gut response to things. And so it's really confusing when people are like, well, like it's either like a big belly fuck yes or a big belly fuck no. Like I don't feel it in my belly. My mind wants to run in circles for me. And I've kind of spent the last couple years almost making my mind the enemy and almost like demonizing the fact that I tend to just like overthink things, and instead I'm really softening into, wait a minute, there's actually like magic and wisdom there, right? Like there's beauty and value in the thoughtfulness my mind does. And also, how can we invite the body into it? How can they work together? Because what happened at first is when I began whatever this journey is called, like I said, I demonized my mind and I would force myself to drop into my body. I would force myself to feel the yes or the no somatically. And I'm laughing because I think that's really cool if you do experience that in your body. And I wish I could say that I've gotten to that place. But again, I've just kind of invited myself to soften into like, maybe that's not actually it for me. I think we all feel and experience and discern in different ways. And I'm now kind of rebuilding this relationship with my mind and really beginning to learn, I guess, the different voices, the different parts of like, is that spiral that I'm witnessing my mind go through, is that fear talking? Is that like ego? Is that heart, right? Like just really recognizing like, hey, what is this coming from? And yeah, that's been really valuable for me to kind of stop trying to force. It's almost like I've compartmentalized. So like it was like this pendulum swing of recognizing like, oh, I just live in my head. I'm like a walking head and so disconnected from my body. Like that was real. That was a very real thing for almost all of my life. And it was being pregnant and having a really incredible birth experience that helped me to reconnect with my body for the first time. And so I needed that. But that kind of swung me on the pendulum so hard to one side where, like I said, I made my mind the enemy and I was really kind of forcing myself to lead with my body and to, yeah, just make my body kind of run the show. And I'm now kind of recognizing that, wait a minute, like, again, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. Like, I love body-based work, and obviously I am absolutely in favor of like embodiment, and I live, breathe, and teach like somatic practices. So I'm not poo-pooing on any of that, but I also think there's value in continuing to like understand, tend to, and work on our mindset, because if we are forgetting about our mind, if we're just trying to cut it off, we're still creating that disconnection. We're just the other way around. And so, right, we have to find that right relationship between the two. And I think this is where where do I want to go with this? Yeah, like I guess just that mind body connection. Like I don't see a lot of people talking about how to reconnect the two. I see a lot of people talking about how to reconnect the body, and I see a lot of people very much talking about like mindset stuff. But what about like connecting the two of them, and how do we work with our minds and our bodies? And I think for me, especially because I'm unraveling neurodivergence, again, there's been that part of me that wants to make my brain the enemy. And so it's this opportunity to come back into relationship with it and not just gaslight all the experiences and just believe that, oh, my brain's a superpower and we're just going to lean onto all of the magic my brain can produce, because that's not it either, right? Like my brain also experiences challenges, and yeah, it's just finding that balance. It's finding that balance. Where was I going with this? I think talking about the fact that I am intentionally, consciously, actively practicing making faster decisions with the permission slip that I get to change my mind. And what's coming up for me as I experiment with that is still buttloads of like shame and judgment and this like projection of being flaky, and like the inner voice can be so mean, like, you just didn't have it all figured out yet, you should have spent more time thinking about it, you need to just commit to yourself, and like changing your mind means you're whatever, right? It's wild, because again, those things aren't true. I really don't believe those things are true, but I'm allowing myself to just witness that mind chatter and not lead by it, but just like hold space for it, right? Like there's a part of me that is still running with fear and in survival, and there's a part of me that is trying to protect me from something. So instead of like shaming that part of me or just completely suppressing it or ignoring it or bypassing it altogether to make it go away, I'm sitting with it. I'm like giving it a spot at the table. I'm not letting it have the driver's seat, but I'm giving it a spot at the table, and I'm building a relationship with it. I'm literally having conversations energetically with it to ask like, what are you wanting me to see right now, and how can I like support you and hold space for you? I'm totally losing my train of thought. The point is I just want to normalize just the turbulence of all of that, the turbulence of maybe practicing changing your mind more and making quick decisions and sitting with whatever comes up after that. I think it's also a beautiful way to deepen self-trust, because it's literally initiating me and inviting me into just holding the pose, and not in like, I'm committed to this, so I'm doing this. There's aspects of that, but there's also like, I'm committing to the possibility that I might change my mind, knowing that I can hold myself through whatever consequences come from changing my mind, right? My dog's licking himself and it sounds gross. I just want you to know, that it is okay to change your mind. I want you to know that it is okay to feel awkward and clunky and clumsy and cringy. And I truly believe that all of those things, as uncomfortable as they are, they're signs of growth. And so maybe the medicine here for you, the medicine for me is actually beginning to get comfortable with those things, getting comfortable feeling awkward, getting comfortable with feeling cringy, getting comfortable with feeling clumsy, getting comfortable in just saying like, I don't know, getting comfortable and saying like, I changed my mind, getting comfortable with saying like, I actually want to do things different. Because the thing is when we resist those things, when we resist that urge of like, I actually want to do something different, that's a very, very sneaky form of self-abandonment, because you are so hung up on staying committed to whatever it is you previously committed to, whether or not you're accountable to something outside of yourself. That really doesn't matter, although that plays a part. It doesn't matter. The point is if you aren't allowing yourself to change your mind, if you're not allowing yourself to evolve, if you're not allowing yourself to take off the winter boots and the toque and the scarf because it's now sunny and summer outside, you are abandoning yourself. You are literally causing harm to yourself. You are causing harm to your soul, to your heart, to your being, to your vibration. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, we're talking about how heavy and hard the times are. And yes, they are. They really, really are. But how much of it are we making like 10 times harder for ourselves? How often is it that we're over efforting, or that we are clinging on to something old, an identity, a belief, a support system? How often is it that we're actually the ones doing the chokehold on ourselves? Something to sit with. Something to sit with, right? And I think if you're anything like me, there's this fear of being a victim. There's a fear of being in victim mentality. And I feel like I'm almost hyper aware of it. And reminding myself that, wait, am I making this harder for myself in some way? How can I let this be easier? How can I let this be more simple? How can I open myself up to support? That really helps me to soften into kind of that fear and to like not get stuck in victim mentality. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will see that I am in a different outfit. And you might have noticed that I was half walking away with my laptop in hand before this point. It was time to go pick up our daughter from daycare. And so I just abruptly ended the episode very awkwardly. And so coming back today, today's a new day. That's why I'm wearing different clothes. Yes, I put on new clothes on a new day. That is actually an abnormal thing for me. I go through like seasons where I have a favorite sweater and I will literally wear the same clothes for like a couple days in a row, shamelessly. But today I'm in clean clothes. Hooray, yay me. If you're listening to the podcast, then ignore all that because you wouldn't have any idea. But yeah, today's a new day. I'm just jumping back on to finish the end of this episode because the other thing I wanted to talk about is just naming the fact that in this season of me recognizing my own transition and recognizing my own, I guess, discomfort and resistance to change and being inconsistent and the inner critic and judgment about being flaky and all of that, I'm also recognizing that bits of that, I may already name this, that bits of that obviously are serving a purpose. There's always a purpose to some of that inner critiquing, right? Our inner critic literally is calling us in and calling us up to our bigger vision and our highest path, if you believe in that, which I do. And so there's always medicine in the inner critic if we are willing to be in relationship with that voice. And anyways, in all of that, what I've kind of recognized and reflected on is that I am truly feeling overwhelmed in the amount I have on the go right now. And I'm always reminding myself when it feels like I've taken too big of a bite, when I've bitten off more than I can chew, that I'm in charge of how big of the bites I take, right? I'm going to say that again. Like if you are also feeling like you've bitten off more than you can chew, you get to decide how big of a bite you are taking, and you get to pace out when that next bite is. You get to create the space and the pause and the supportive environment to facilitate that digestion. And so anyways, in realizing all of that, that's actually what kind of catalyzed me to be changing my mind. And so I'm changing my mind on my upcoming offering, Unruly. Originally, it was actually supposed to start next week, and there was a whole chain of events, personal events, my daughter going in for dental surgery, things like that, that kind of just reminded me that, wait a minute, it actually feels too full and too busy in the season of life. I'm at capacity and I'm respecting that. And so I've decided to push back the start date until May 1st. That immediately feels so much more nurturing and supportive for me. It gives me more time to talk about it and be excited about it, and it fits better in my schedule. I was totally rushing it out of excitement and a previous commitment that I made to myself. And again, just giving myself grace and space that sometimes those commitments need to be broken when they are serving kind of a bigger purpose and in pursuit and devotion to a bigger plan and vision. And so here we are. Unruly is now starting on May 1st. It continues to be an 8-week roundtable and business lab for fellow neurodivergent coaches, doulas, and healers. And specifically, I'm creating this as a space and a community for those of us that are unraveling the identity clusterfuck that comes with recognizing and even owning the fact that you are neurodivergent. If you've been here for any length of time, you know that that has been a big unraveling for me. There's been buttloads of just confusion and grief and a whole truckload of other big emotions. And I really want to create a space for those of us to digest some of that. And at first I thought this was just going to be for people that are newly identified, but I've sat with it and I think there's actually so much value in not putting parameters of where you are in that journey and where you are on that spectrum, because I think we get to learn from each other. And that's what I want this to be. That's why it's called a roundtable, right? Because it's not me standing on a soapbox teaching and preaching. Really, none of my containers and offers are that, but this specifically is me just facilitating a space for us to gather and connect and soundboard with each other and process some of the really confusing things that come up in this identity evolution and reclaiming, right? That's really what it is. It's a reclamation. And I do want this to be specific for coaches, doulas, healers, and entrepreneurs, because I think there's a different kind of flavor that shows up in the business world and in marketing and content creation and offer creation and holding space, and just the fact that as an entrepreneur, you have the time freedom to create your schedule. You have the autonomy and agency to make your own rules. And I'm seeing so many of us still kind of falling victim to the way it's always been done. And so Unruly really is a space to get a little unruly, reclaim that unruliness that's probably always been within us, and essentially widen the permission field for all of us. And lean on each other as resources and supports and as soundboards and mirrors, and just see what happens from there. So I'll leave details for that in the show notes. Like I said, it's 8 weeks. And so I have each roundtable set up with a theme. Obviously, there's loads of flexibility in that. There's also going to be a Slack group. So very open-ended, very just an open space for deep reflection and expression and vulnerability, and a space to be witnessed and heard and seen and all of the things. So I'm excited for that. And now we have about a month until that happens. So that will be in the show notes. And what else do I have going on? I have space right now for a couple more one-on-one clients. I've really been exploring creating bespoke packages for my one-on-one clients. That feels really good. So instead of me saying, we're going to meet for 12 weeks every week, I'm now basically saying, hey, what do you need? What feels the most nourishing and supportive and meets the cravings that you have in this season of your life? So if that's just a once a month call with Voxer support, cool, let's do it. If it's only Voxer support, cool, let's do it. If it is weekly calls, cool, let's do it. I want to meet you where you're at. And obviously with that flexibility, that also means a flexibility in pricing and the investment piece. So just want to name that in there. And going forward, I think I'm going to try with all of my offers to give the opportunity for fellow Canadians to pay in Canadian dollars. So that includes Unruly. Unruly, you have the option to pay in Canadian currency if you're Canadian. What else? My friend Laura and I listened to the episode just before this, Musings and Magic. Her and I are creating a very specific program for mother-serving professionals, so doulas, birth workers, lactation consultants, women hosting mother circles, specific for you around inner mastery and business magic, and really just meeting you in that place where like your doula training left you hanging, or insert whatever professional training you've done. That clunky space where you're like, okay, cool. Like I have this job. I've been doing this maybe for a little while now, but I'm actually realizing that I'm holding space for so many people. I need someone to hold space for me. And so this is a group program to literally have space held for you and to be in community with people holding similar, crazy, bold, world-changing visions as you. And again, the soundboarding piece, the opportunity to be witnessed and all of that, and really begin to embody a lot of the stuff that you probably already teach and preach to your clients, right? It's like that kind of like call in of like, hey, are you actually holding yourself through these things? Are you nourishing yourself? Are you tending to your nervous system? All of those things mixed in with some business magic. So links will be in the show notes for that as well. We have early bird opportunities going on right now. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for joining me in this roller coaster of an episode.